Hi, welcome to Understanding Conscious Cryptids with me, Khat Hansen, your host. Hi everyone, it's me, Khat. Welcome to today's lesson. Today's lesson is going to be, I guess, on dinosaurs. Yeah, I know they're supposed to be extinct, but funny thing is they're not. So right off the bat, I've had a number of people request that I address this issue and speak about the ropen. I'm not sure if very many of you know about them. They're large pterodactyl-like flying monsters that are seen in Papua New Guinea and some of the other islands around there. People oftentimes tell me, well, I don't know how you can say that dinosaurs existed during the time of humans, and I often like to point out to them that they very much did exist, because not only do we have a fossil record of the dinosaurs, but we also have verbal documentation through the different North American tribes that existed here on our continent at that time. Now, I need people to kind of bear with me here. Dinosaurs, 9 times out of 10, when we find their fossils, they are not a complete fossil. Okay? They're usually scattered, and this is due to water erosion, animals that killed, say for instance a Tyrannosaurus that killed a Triceratops. You know, we're going to find a body per se, but we're not going to find the head, because the head has been scattered due to scavenging from other dinosaurs at the time period. So when you find a large dinosaur skeleton that's been fossilized in the rocks, you know, there are always things on them that may be missing. You know, you're not going to find a full-sized skeleton per se. Pieces and parts are missing. It's like your Mr. Potato Head that you had as a kid. You know, you may have had arms for it, but the nose was missing. You know, and so things like this, I don't know about you, but myself as a kid, when I couldn't find Mr. Potato Head's nose, it usually turned into a blob of clay that was added to it. So that way it was a complete Mr. Potato Head until I found his nose. So, that being said, when you come across a typical skeleton that's out there, you're not going to find it huge and put together. It's just not in one piece like you see on television shows. It's not like that. So the reason I'm elaborating on this is because many people who I guess you would call themselves armchair excavators, armchair experts, whatever you want to call them, have told me that there is no record of the indigenous peoples here on the North American continent having or knowing of dinosaurs. And I want to say for the record that it's not true. Not true at all. They had names. They knew what these creatures were, and they actually had names for them, okay? And they're not your common names, you know, so you can't mistake what they were talking about as being, oh, it's a small lizard that they're talking about. That's not true, because it was very specific how they described them. You know, they're described in ways that we would never have seen. We ourselves would never have expected to see these words being used, these phrases, you know. And it's really kind of interesting when you start digging into it to find out that here on the North American continent, not only were the native indigenous peoples familiar with them, they had stories that were handed down verbally about them, as well as names for them. You know, it's hard to explain how I feel when someone tells me, oh, you guys don't have any history of dinosaurs, so you're making that up, Khat. That's not true. Way back when the scouts were here exploring the land, you know, they used the indigenous people as guides. So when they were bringing these huge bones to the French and others and showing them to them, they wanted to know why or where they got these things. You know, they weren't familiar with them. And then the indigenous peoples were telling them in their own language what the name for this creature was. I'm just going to give a couple examples here. And I hope that you'll bear with me, because I know a lot of you are not big on archaeology, and that's fine, but I'm kind of opening this and segueing in to discussions on the roping. We had the ones that I'm talking about now, the names that I'm going to give you now, are recent, you know, within the last 200 years of archaeology talking about them and finding the names. Paleontologist Reed MacDonald, he gave Lakota Sioux designations on several Oligocene mammals, okay, and a lot of these were from the White River, and he named them Titanka, excuse me, and that means dog with large teeth, okay? So when he found these fossils, he was looking at them, and he was in the Badlands, you know, and he was talking to the natives there, and the natives are the one who gave him the names. So he actually used them to name the fossil after them. The name for the primate fossil discovered near Wounded Knee Pine Ridge Reservation is Sioux, and the way that it's spoken of is Ekmawe Chasala, and that means monkey or little cat man. Okay, so you're finding this fossil and you show it to these people, and they tell you that they actually have a name for it. And I find it really interesting that they called it or little cat man. You know, I mean, it's interchangeable, which a lot of Native American terms are. So they name, you know, it's interchangeable, and when they found it, you know, it was already to them supposedly known as a little cat man. And if you ever look through my photos, you know, in the videos that I put up, I show you right off the bat that there is something called, I call the cat man, and it's because he is a cat. man. He has hands, you know, and he comes from a different different dimension, different realm, but he's able to walk between our world and theirs. Quetzalcoatlus, the giant pterosaur, that's named after the Aztecs god, you know, the feathered serpent. They knew what these things were, these creatures were. So they had names for them. You know, and I mean, I can go on and on and on, and I'm not going to do that because then it starts getting annoying to many of you, because you don't want to learn about that. You want to learn about the cryptids. But I wanted to make it clear that there are many, many Native American tribes here on the North and South American continent who have actual names for these creatures. And they can't just name it after a fossil. No, they've seen it, because they will oftentimes tell you what it looked like. They have a verbal history of what this creature looked like. Now, that being said, the ropin that we're going to discuss is a very strong runner to me, candidate runner for the Thunderbird. You know, Hello-anem in my people's language. To me, it smacks of a Thunderbird. You know, and if you ever listen to the Native American tales of Thunderbirds, they don't look like birds per se. You know, they look more like a representation of a carnivorous pterosaur, you know. But also, too, we have tales of giant birds, and these birds do look like giant teratorns, you know, these big, big birds, you know, huge birds with wingspans of, you know, 20 feet or more. You know, it just depends upon which legend you're listening to. So, when I'm talking about those, I like people to understand exactly what it is I'm saying and what I'm referring to. That way, there's no misunderstanding about what's going on. As well as when people are talking about seeing these beings when they are out in the forest. You know, and I want people to understand there again, don't mess with it, because these things in every verbal tale from the North American peoples, they're not friendly. They will eat you, you know. And I myself have seen the Thunderbird, as I've said in the past. And to me, it just projected off the energy of run away. You know, it was straight fear. And that was fine. You know, I ran away. I didn't want to deal with it. And I want people to understand that I in no way am advocating people to go out and have an interaction, you know, with one of these creatures, because it's not safe, you know. And I always tell everyone to please, if you're going to go out there and search for these things, to actively be aware of what you're searching for, because a lot of times what you end up encountering is hostile or dangerous. And these guys are no different, because if they are what science thinks they are, then they are carnivorous. They'll eat you, you know, and they'll look at a human being as prey, which, there again, makes sense, especially when you start listening to the stories of the Ropin. I mean, not just the destination science, or I'm not sure what the name of it is. It was on Sci-Fi a few years back, and people were watching this, and they were big into, going out and looking for the thunderbird or the ropen, whatever you want to call it. They were out looking for it. And I kind of thought that was dumb at the time, because there are many stories of the ropen having hands. So if this is a pterosaur, I guess, and it does have hands or a form of hands to grasp, it could very well snatch a human up. I can understand that, and the stories of my people talk about Hello and them as having hands, in that they walked like a giant bat would walk. That's not a bird. That's something else entirely. So whatever people are seeing, think of the consequences of these things having hands. You could try to run away from them, but it really would not work, because they could fly over you and at any point swoop down and snatch you. And because they don't have feathers, you're not going to hear any type of noise per se, unless they make a scream or a caw, whatever sound they do make. So I think they would just swoop down on you, snatch you up, and be gone with you. And that does account for a lot of the people missing, in their forests over there. They're quite dangerous. I can think of the stories of many tribes here, and they talk about them, and they say that they had teeth, but they had it in a bird beak. Think about that, teeth in a bird beak, a giant bird beak with teeth. That's kind of terrifying, it could swoop down, bite your head off. You would never even have the chance to scream. And the ropen is no better, their tales of it state very emphatically that it eats humans, it also glows. And there again, there's another aspect of a thunderbird, in that it is self-illuminating. So is this because of its environment or its diet? Could it be living underground where it's, bumping into phosphorescent in caves? Or, phos usually is underground. So to get it, you're going to have to dig. Are these things capable of that? Do they burrow? There's a lot of interesting things to think about here in associating them, That being said, people are also asking me about things like raptors being seen, and do we have a name for those? And yeah, we do. We actually do. Elo is the main body of something, that you would eat. It's I don't know how to explain it. It's edible, soft parts. That's the best way to translate it out. And these things, I think that's pretty self-descriptive. It eats the soft parts. Well, humans are pretty much soft parts everywhere. So you have to be aware that soft parts kind of is self-descriptive. It would eat the soft parts, and that's its name, and that's kind of, like I said, very indicative of what it does. So when you're out running around in the forest and you run into something that looks like a 2-foot, 3-foot, 4-foot tall lizard running, think about this for a second. The only reason that humans are top of the food chain, per se, is because They have the brain, and we developed it. But what happens if there's an animal, creature, lizard, whatever you want to call it, out there that has the sensibilities to think like a human being? You know, that's not too far-fetched, because we see many animals out there that already do this. You know, birds that use rocks as tools. They use sticks. Apes using sticks and bones and rocks. I mean, there's any number of them. So think about that. If you were to run across this lizard and you thought it was running away from you, when in fact it was actually running far enough ahead of you so that you couldn't see it, but it was actually doubling back on you. That's kind of a terrifying thought. And I guess you guys are getting to hear my cat sit here and talk to us. His name is Isova. Isova is Chata for big cat. Not very creative, but that's what he is. A huge cat who looks like a lynx. So I just want people to be aware when they're out in the forest exactly what they may bump into. And that's the whole idea of this series, because I had many people sending me emails and letters asking me, what the heck is it that I'm seeing? You know, I saw this and I don't know what it is. So this has led into me talking about all the different cryptids that are out there. And a lot of them are very familiar, and when I explain what one is, it kind of fits into the category of others. So I just wanted to lay this little footwork here, groundwork, so that people understand that I'm not making this up. You know, we really do have words for these cryptid creatures and beings, you know. And that way, when you let me tell you the stories or the explanations of what these things are, I thank you for that, because you're perpetuating our own indigenous history of these creatures. But you're also letting me share with you the reality that is out there and that many, many people are bumping into. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of step away from this lesson, let everybody digest what I've had to say, and I'll go ahead and do the next lesson. In the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to forward them on to me. I want to thank all my Patreon patrons for their help and support, because I really couldn't do it without you guys. And I appreciate all of you, my listeners, because, like I said, without you, I don't get the chance to share our history and our culture. And by doing this, I let you into our world a little bit more, and that way it fosters a kindred spirit, kindred outlook on the world. So, that being said, I hope you all have a great weekend ahead, and I'll see you at the next lesson.